Hello and welcome to Wising Studio Artist Live. So this is our programme for young creatives and we're going out live every day this week at 3 and 5 p.m. So welcome everyone who's joining us. We're really pleased to have you here and it's really exciting to get to work with our studio artists over the week. So over the week we'll be working with 10 different studio artists, and if you don't manage to catch the sessions at those times, then you'll be able to watch them again on the Wising Broadcasts.art platform after the session. They'll be uploaded at the end of every day. So the sessions will be a chance to get to know the artist, how they work, as well as providing a creative prompt. And this is all part of Discover Creative Careers Week and giving you an insight into how artists work. So please do feel free to log in and ask questions in the chat on YouTube as we go along. We've already received some via Instagram and we'll be asking these and any that come up during the session at the end. So do feel free to post them as they come along and we'll keep an eye on the chat. So for now, we're joined by one of our studio artists, Naomi Harwin, to kick us off.
Hi, thanks Lucy. So today, I'm just going to introduce my practice as an artist, but I thought I'd also talk about a little bit how I got to Wising as well. And then later on, we'll have a practical activity, or I'll introduce a practical activity you can use as a way of making and generating shapes that you can apply in your own time. So yeah, I thought I'd start by just saying how I got here to Wising. So I got my studio in April 2015, but actually prior to that I had a young artist residency in 2012, and so that was between my first and second year of university, and that was a project for young creatives where they could come over the summer period and have a shared studio space. There was opportunities to work with the studio artists that were there at the time, and we had some workshops with them, and there was also opportunities for collaboration, and then we ended up making work during that period and had an exhibition at the end of that time. So that was kind of my first introduction to Wising as a sort of young artist while studying still. And then after that, so I was studying fine art at Norwich University of the Arts, and then I graduated and ended up going straight into a graduate residency programme, which was based in Stoke-on-Trent at a gallery called Airspace Gallery. And so that was a 6-month period where I was given a studio space, there was mentoring, there was also opportunities to engage with the community there. And so then I ended up having my first ever exhibition, which was a combination of all the work created during that time. And so then I returned to Cambridge in 2015 and applied and got a studio here at Wising. And so I've been here sort of ever since, really. And then I ended up getting involved in Circuit, which was at the time a national programme, but which continues to run today between Kettle's Yard and Wising Arts Centre, which is a sort of young creatives group which get to come together to create sort of events, workshops, but also try out different ways of making and exploring the creative arts through sort of engagement with different artists. And then through that programme, I moved on to Circuit Conductors, which was more of a training programme on sort of art education and facilitation. And so I've been working from about 2017 with Wising on education programmes as well. So that's sort of just outside of my practice. And so I'll just move on to my work as an artist. So I'm interested in relations. I'll just bring up some images now, actually, which might just have a look. So this is a picture of an object that I've made, and so, like I was saying, I'm interested in relations, and by that I mean the way in which we explore connections between two things. So that might be ourselves and something else, like an object or a space or another person, or it might be the connection between two things that aren't directly connected to us. And in relationship to that, I'm also interested in ideas around perception, so how we're then able to gather information about this object whether it's sort of mapping, drawing, or just sort of exploring the aesthetics of those objects. But then how we're then able to interpret and understand that information later on. So my work is predominantly focused on objects. And so I tend to start with an object such as this. There you go. So I tend to start with objects such as this, and then I will go on to explore and identify the attributes and qualities of these objects, going on to make photographs such as these, drawings, sculptures, prints, and then I'll use these works or I'll translate the objects through these works. So they'll be translated and then they'll be retranslated, moving between 2D and 3D forms. And that'll be a process that sort of continues and repeats until something entirely new is created. And so it's quite a process-led and material-influenced practice. And through those, I will create sort of assemblages of these artworks. So there'll be sort of sculptures, drawings, paintings, prints. And so this is a smaller installation that is made of works that all stem from the same source object. So these are some works that are up over in Singapore at the moment. And so this is an example of a sort of larger installation, and this was at Wising this time last year, and this was my exhibition Encounter. And so this exhibition actually has been quite influential in my research at the moment and where I'm moving towards. I'm becoming much more interested in how we engage with space and orientate ourselves. So I've been reading more recently about scenography, which you might sort of think of in relation to theatrical design, staging, but can also be applied to everyday life. And so that's how we might direct the viewer's focus and attention to a specific subject matter or feeling, creating an atmosphere. And so you might be able to do that through the use of materials, objects, lighting, sound, video work, or performance as well, maybe clothing. And so that's where things are at the moment. I don't know if there's any questions for now. That's kind of an introduction to my practice. If not, I can move on to our activity.
I think one that we picked up earlier, Naomi, was whether your work has changed quite a lot as your practice has developed. Or have you always been interested in these things?
I would say there's always been a thread. So the interest has kind of, the core of the interest has been the same, but it's developed as I've progressed. I would say that materially and visually, I think it has progressed and developed quite a bit. I think also where my head's at in terms of new ideas, I think there's a scope for quite different approaches as well, whether that's bringing performance or a more theatrical staging, which is kind of moves away from the solely sculptural drawing-based practice that was maybe my work a couple of years ago. Yeah.
Thank you, Naomi.
So I thought I would introduce an activity that is kind of using the processes that I use in my practice, but it's reasonably simple. So it might be something that offers a way of generating ideas and shapes, but you can push it quite far. So you can repeat the process until you're happy with it, really. And it's a process you can build on. So essentially what I'm suggesting is using everyday existing objects and then using light and shadow to cast and then trace new shapes. So it's a process of generating shapes which can then be applied to existing work, new projects. So it might be applicable to design, textiles. It could be typography. You can use it in any way that you see fit, really. So the best way to do this is sort of setting up, you might want to consider the space that you're working in. If you get a nice clear table, I'd suggest maybe a space where you can move around, because you might want to be able to trace around the object, and you want to avoid moving your paper. You'll also have a light source, and you want to avoid moving that, and then the object itself. So you might want to use a table which you can walk around, or if it's safe to do so, you can work on the floor, but just conscious of your surroundings. And then, so the next thing you want to do is gather your materials. So you'll need a light source. That might be a torch, a lamp, so that might be like a desk lamp, or you can also use the light on your phone. And then if you gather some paper, pencils, scissors, some blue tack, and then if you're going on to develop that further, you might also want some coloured card, drawing materials. And if you've used craft knives before and it's safe to do so, a craft knife and cutting mats, but making sure you're using those safely. So you might use those for more delicate designs and shapes. And then, so once you've got those materials, you want to gather your object as well, or gather your objects. So you might want to consider whether that's a household object. It might be a natural object that you get from sort of exploring outside, or it might be an existing artwork. And so when considering which object to choose, you might want to think about its existing outline and shape, whether it's got interesting qualities already. The structure of it, so whether it's got holes, whether there's sort of meshed surfaces, or whether it's solid and how that might impact your shadows. You can also think about transparency. If there's any materials that you can see are slightly translucent or have a slightly coloured sort of acetate or something like that, that might create some colour. And also the surface, whether it's reflective, it might create the option for reflecting or casting further shapes on your paper. So this is just a quick example. So I've chosen just like a reel of cord. And so I thought this might be quite interesting, just because you can see there's a few grooves and notches that create some shape. You can also be quite flexible with this object, because you can play around with the string. I'd suggest moving your object away from the paper as much as possible, just because tracing that string in that position would be quite tricky. So when I did that, I then moved it away. So what you want to do is lay your paper down, place your object on top, and then play around with your light source and figure out what shapes you can make, and then trace those. And so this is the shape generated from that process, and you might not be able to necessarily gather that that was the source of that shape. So it's quite interesting what shapes you can create and gather. So that's the first step of this process. And then this is just a quick placement where we've got the negative remaining card and then the shape itself. But then you might want to go on a bit further with this. And so this is just another example. So to show you, this is the source object for this shape. So it's just a leftover sort of maquette sculpture in my studio. And place that down on the paper and did the technique I just described. And so this was the first one. And then I used that, I cut that out, and then actually used it in a kind of sculptural way. So using some blue tack, I then bent the cutout and was then able to trace the shadow of that. So repeating that process, I was then able to get another shape. So drawings here. So I sort of started out with this, and then from that I was able to get these two drawings and shapes. And so that's quite a simple process, a way of generating new forms. So you can repeat that over and over again, cutting out your drawing and then using that for the next source object. And so you might want to to do that to either create something sculptural, so you might bring all those cutouts together. You could trace that, or you could just start to build a sculpture itself. You could create some collages, or you could go on to use those in various designs, whether that's like textile design. You might want to use that for typography, so you might have an existing letter, and then you might want to do the same sort of thing and apply that. So that's a process that might be useful either when you're stuck, or you just want to introduce something new, a new element to your method of working. So yeah, that's.
Thank you, Naomi. That sounds like a really useful process for people to go through if they're, I know sometimes if I'm creating artwork, I get stuck looking at a blank sheet of paper, and sometimes that can be useful just as a starting point to think, how can I actually create a shape and go create something from that? I'm just curious to know, how do you, as an artist, if you're using this process, how do you decide on what sort of the end product is going to be like? So you showed us earlier at the start the slides of your kind of artwork which filled a whole room, that sort of installation work. How do you decide what the final end product is going to be, whether it's a sort of installation taking up a whole space, or whether it's a sculpture or just a drawing?
It's generally based on I suppose the outcome that I'd like to create, whether that's so with this exhibition, for example, I really wanted to create a space that took the viewer somewhere else. So you felt like you were in this immersive space that you were then, that described this initial object. So this exhibition was made using like 3 objects. And from those 3 objects, I created everything that you can see within the space. And so I think generally I'd like to create these sort of immersive experiences. That's the sort of direction I would tend to like to explore. However, I have created smaller sculptures, and I think it's based on the material I'm using will influence the kind of presentation that I want to sort of give to the viewer. So yeah, I've been more recently making or playing around with clay and ceramics. So those might be just objects that are objects in themselves that you might view on a smaller scale. So I think it's often influenced by the material in that decision.
Yeah, it almost sounds like part of it is just going with the process as well, and seeing then how it might work best, rather than I'm going to create a textile design or create an immersive installation, and you're kind of going through the process to come up with the idea.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah.
As well. I'm also curious to know, how do you sort of make money as being an artist? Can people buy these artworks, or could anyone just buy it, or how does it work if you're working with galleries as well?
So I mean, generally the work that I make, I haven't sold a lot of work so far, so I tend to sort of make work more based on just my interest and exploration of ideas. I'm just really kind of curious and wanting to explore this thread of thought. But for example, this exhibition, so I was commissioned by Rising to make this show. So there was a budget for materials, but also a budget to sort of pay myself and make the work and generate the work. So there's instances where you might be commissioned by a gallery or another arts organisation to do a project. But then there's also sort of grants out there which you can apply for to obviously help with the development of ideas, or it might be project-specific grants. But then at the same time, more recently, I've created some Riso prints which are on sale and people can buy. So there's smaller scale artworks that are sort of purchasable. And but I suppose in terms of making money, I also have other part-time jobs on at the same time, sort of. So those predominantly pay the rent, but there are opportunities to earn money through my artwork as well, but it's mainly commission-based, I would say.
Thank you, Naomi. It's really interesting to hear that actually, even if you're creating artwork, you don't have to worry all the time about whether someone's actually going to buy it. So whether it's a painting that's actually going to sell, but maybe there are other ways of creating them, creating money or making money, and to create what you want as an artist as well. And do you think there's any age limit on when you can become an artist?
I wouldn't say so. I mean, so obviously I followed the route of going through school and then university, and then sort of continuing that sort of career path. But then, you know, there's definitely artists out there that I'm aware of that have had another career and then started an art practice later on. So I think there's really no limit to when you can start, and you know, you can start much younger and be exploring lots of creative practices through, you know, there's creative learning opportunities out there, which you can get involved in. So I don't think there's really any limit to when you can start, stop, or, you know, it's really flexible and open. It's, you know, very much up to you.
Great, thank you, Naomi. And then just the last question: have you found, like, sort of what are your top tips for any young artists or young creatives watching this? What would you say to them?
I would say, I think community is a big thing. So finding places where there's there's already an existing community, and getting involved in any projects and activities, or just dialogues with those people would be really helpful. If there's not that already happening in your area, or not exactly what the kind of community that you'd like to see, maybe you could start by talking with friends and create your own communities. So I think it's probably just dialogue and communication really is a big thing. And just if there's opportunities that you spot, go for them. And if you don't get it, that's fine. It's a lot of, you know, sort of try and see where it goes. So yeah, sort of seek things out in the sense of community and also opportunities. That's a good way to go.
Thank you, Naomi. Yeah, so that kind of advice of putting yourself out there almost, and sharing your work, even if you're sort of 14 and thinking, oh, I'm not quite an artist yet, but actually starting to see yourself in that space, and just kind of test things out, I suppose, share things with friends, whether you've got a youth group, and then things might come out of it. It sounds like that's sort of how things have worked for you in the past as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much, Naomi, for joining us today as part of Wising Studio Artists Live. So just as a reminder, we're going to be here every day on YouTube at 3 p.m. and 5 p.m. all over the week. You can find out more about Naomi's work if you visit the wisingbroadcast.art page. So we've got a link in the chat that you can visit there. And I think that's everything for today. So thanks again, Naomi, for joining us. Thanks everybody for watching us. And we will be working later with Aaron and Asia. You'll get a chance to find out more about their work later on if you join us today at 5.